Thank you, folks. As the credits roll, it gives me great pleasure to introduce two of the creators of the show and two of the directors of the show, Tawfik Wael and Joseph Cedar. Tawfik and Joseph, thank you for joining us. Tawfik's right off a flight from Israel, but Joseph Cedar has no excuse for any jet lag and a short walk, I believe. First of all, I want to say this is the way to see every TV show, right? I mean, I'm not even talking about the big screen. I don't know what your screens are like at home, but seeing it together, that's actually part of it, and having this kind of question and answer and reflection. And as I said before, as civilly as possible, I think that's one of the things we're looking for. And I also want to give a big thank you. I neglected to mention earlier one of our partners on this, IAC, who brought a small group here today, so thank you for joining us. This episode, I mean, the whole show is, we're going to dive in. Are you ready? Do you need a moment? Or the show has been an amazing experience, I find. I'm reflecting right now out loud that the way these characters are humanized is sometimes disturbing, and gives me, someone who followed this whole story in real life, a whole new level. And we're often saying here that we like to look through film beyond the news and see real people. And I think that's where one of the many places the show has taken us, into these lives of these people, and gave us a much deeper understanding of who these people might be. And I'll talk a little bit. I'll ask a little bit later, a little bit more about this question of fiction versus reality, which I think might play a part here. But let's take a few steps back and talk about first, just to share with the audience a little bit. How did this idea develop to make the show? What kind of research did you do? And I'm very interested to know how you worked as a team. The three of you, of course, we're missing the third member of the team, Chagai Levy, who wanted to be here and is one of the creators of the show as well. But I'll let either of you jump in. How did this start?
So HBO approached Keshet and suggested a show about the summer of 2014. I think they might have had, there was a New York Times piece about the trial that Richard Plepler, if I'm not mistaken, thought was interesting, and somehow that led to a conversation between him and Avi Nir, who runs Keshet. They approached Chagai and started developing a show that somehow was a fictional story that took place against the backdrop of the events of 2014. I wasn't involved at this point. Chagai and another writer named Noah Stolman developed a pilot for this fictional story and submitted it back to HBO, and HBO approved a 10-hour series based on what they had worked on. At that point, they came to me, and it took a few weeks for me to understand what this is. I wanted to work with Chagai, and of course, I was happy to have the opportunity to do something for HBO. But I didn't think the story they were working on was something I would know how to do. I didn't like the fictional side of it, and there was something about the research that we had gathered that was just so extreme and dramatic that made any fictional character, any fictional story feel a little trivial. So my suggestion was that we focus on the Abu Khdeir story. At that point, it wasn't, HBO had approved one thing, we were now suggesting something else. We went on a 2-week research marathon, speaking with all the different people who ended up characters in the show. But I think mostly the lawyers gave us a sense that there's an excellent story here that at least Israelis know nothing about. And I was convinced that this was good. Chagai was too. We went back to HBO. We presented a new Bible for the show, and it was approved. Around that time, it was also clear that we needed a Palestinian partner for the Palestinian side of the story, which at that point, it wasn't clear how significant it was, but both Chagai and I knew that we can't tell a Palestinian story. And at this point, I called Tawfik. So maybe you could take it from here, from your side.
Okay. As Youssef said, it's, usually I used to have calls from Israeli directors or producer when they call a Palestinian, they have something about us. So all the time, you know, I don't answer the phone, I do get back, but this time, you know, I like Joseph, I like to work with him, I like what he's doing, so I just call him back, and I found myself traveling with him and with Haggai to East Jerusalem to meet with Abu Khdeir family. It was the first time you know, I didn't understand what's going on, what's the story, if I want to make it. I found myself with a lot of Israeli people, with a lot of researchers and producers. In Abu Khdeir family, Hussein, it's like he's a lovable person, he's smiling all the time. And I felt that the tense between Hussein and Suha, that Israelis are going to tell their own story. And suddenly they understand that I'm the person going to tell their own story, and I can't, you know, forget this relief in their faces, and just they looked at me, you know, with such a face, like they're giving me the most important thing in their life, and I felt it's like it's a destiny, like the story chose me, I didn't choose the story, and this is how it ended up to making this series.
Have they seen it, I'm hoping?
I know that they saw the first 2 episodes. It was very difficult for them. They cried a lot. This is also something that all the time I spoke with Hussein, that I told him, I don't feel comfortable that you and Suha will see the show, because, you know, it's for them, you know, it's to see their own tragedy. It's not something easy. But yeah, I know that there's a journalist just showed them 2 episodes. It was very difficult for them, and just they cried a lot.
So tell me about how did you work on this as far as the division of labor? We're going to get to questions from the audience at the very end, so I'm going to ask the audience to respectfully actually hold back on questions, because once we open it, it turns into some chaos, and we're trying to do this as unchaotic as possible. Thank you. So the division of labor, how is this divided up? Did you each direct different episodes, different storylines, worked on all 3 together?
It's impossible.
Just let it go. And
it's impossible to answer that question because the process was extremely messy. Messy? Haggai was the only one of the 3 of us who had any experience with collaboration. Like when Tawfik directs, no one interferes with what he does. When I direct, usually it's my script and my set. Here it was different. We worked on the scripts together, sometimes on the same Google document. Like I would write an Israeli character, he would write a Palestinian character. Which is an extremely interesting exercise to do, because there was no way that if I were, say, if I would take a scene between the prosecutor and Hussein, there's no way that if I were writing the scene alone, Hussein would be saying what he actually says, and there's no way that if Tawfik would be writing it, Uri's character would be. So it's the result is something that really could have not emerged without these different points of view. Then on set, Tawfik directed the Palestinian side of the story, I directed the Israeli side of the story. And when Israelis met Palestinians, we would coach our actors in their corners and then send them into the ring to do what each of us told them to do. And what's interesting about the set is that many things weren't resolved on set, and we'd always say, okay, when we get to the editing, we'll figure out what to do with all these options that some of them, like Tawfik thought were good and others I thought were good. And then in the editing, we couldn't resolve anything. And till this day, I'm looking at this, there are many things that both of us are not really
I'm
completely
hoping,
happy with.
I'm hoping HBO just gave you deadlines, so it just had to get done. And I mean, actually, the complexities are there. I think we see different sides and different pieces coming together, and I find that as part of the beauty of it all, and actually what makes it work, and possibly that empathy that comes out to those human stories is because you don't feel that it's just black and white. You feel that there's different perspectives coming to light here.
Yeah, I can say it's also as Joseph started. I never made TV. It's the first time, and it was not easy. 3 persons or 3 creators working together. But what I learned really in the process that different opinions it's very healthy, especially to TV series. It's something. It's not your own film. 1 hour and a half. It's like you have 10 hours. Something huge, a long process, and it was tough. Big discussions, fighting, but it's like we kept the respect of each other, and this was important because everybody of us, really care about the quality of the show. Everybody from his point of view, sometimes we didn't agree together, but at the end you can see it. For me, it's the miracle of this show that it happened, that we could do it at the end.
And they say the Coen brothers work together as 2, and they say that they're a 2-headed beast, that they actually, or maybe they share a brain sometimes, but to have 3 directors who are not related, I can't even imagine the complexities of that, and I mean the fact that it came out as, I have to say, it plays, one might not know that it's being made by 3 different directors in some ways.
That's a little frustrating because we all obsess about things that are really important to us, and then when you don't get your way, it doesn't really make a difference. It's a revelation for me.
I'm going to jump into the reactions to the show now that we're done. We've seen all 10 episodes, and you've gotten some very strong reactions to it from all sides. I assume the strongest, I think the loudest, might have been Netanyahu responding to this. I know the Times covered that, called it anti-Semitic, and called to boycott the show. I'm assuming you're not too surprised by this. Are you surprised by the reactions? I'd like to hear how you felt the reactions were, and also what didn't come up in the news here was the Palestinian reaction to this, which I'm interested to hear.
I can say, I don't care about what Netanyahu, it just meant advertising for the show. It was great.
He's good about that. He looks out for Keshet. He looks out for...
I can tell you, even, he make the Arabs, suddenly to start to watch the show because what he's talking about. So if he hates something, it's good. So they started to see it. But I think, it's he used it as a personal reason for the elections. I don't think he saw the show. It just made us a favor, I think. I can say that from the beginning, it was very hard also, not just dealing in the art level of making the show, it's also a political level, because you are dealing with the taboo story, also in the Israeli society, also in the Palestinian society. And I remember I all the time told Joseph and Haggai, especially when I spoke a lot with Joseph, that for me this story is reflecting the powerful of the Jewish people, reflecting the powerful of Israel. That you can tell, you have the courage, you have the power to tell this story. So I can look at it, from the other side. And if I speak about the Palestinian side also, it's part of the discussion, for Palestinian, why you start the show from this point, where is the occupation? where's the daily occupation, the daily suffering, the life in Jerusalem, that they are facing, you know, the system every day, you know, trying to just get rid of them out of Jerusalem. So also for Palestinians, it's they have their own creative sides, but you know, at the end, I believe most of the reactions are really good. People have a good connection with the show. Really, you know, I have a very good reactions. Even they can, not just the Palestinian story, even suddenly they can identify with the Israeli characters, you know, because as you said, to humanize, because you know everybody is a human being, you know. Even if you are a killer, if you are a murderer, you're still a human being. And for me, you know, it's when you humanize your enemy or your murderer, your enemy, you humanize also yourself. So this is the process of as we thought, you know, making this show.
Your fondest reactions, Jim?
So the Netanyahu thing was, of course, it helped bring awareness to the show, and that was good. I bet you he's Israeli.
I don't know what would make you think that.
When he comes in, you can ask him. I was upset that Netanyahu didn't actually watch the show. Like with this naive hope towards our leaders, I thought that would be a pretty good audience for our show. And I thought Netanyahu, after all these years that he's been the prime minister, maybe could afford to, I don't know, I think he has enough free time to watch it. And I'm pretty sure that if he went into this story with an open mind, he would get something that he needs. So I was sorry that his reaction was cynical. I would have loved for him to actually have seen the show.
If nothing else, he plays a part in it, and you know, you might want to see that. Were there any reactions that surprised you? You going into the show, you're dealing here with, you know, a topic that is, you knew you were going to get strong. It's the most sensitive topic. You were going to get strong reactions. Was there?
So the complicated reactions came after the first episode, and they had to do with why we're focusing on the murder of Mohammed Abu Khdeir and not on the abduction and murder of the 3 Jewish boys, which was something that we can respond to. But then it got this twist where the parents of the 3 Jewish boys were brought into that argument, and it became something personal, that we hurt them by not telling their story. And that was something that was difficult to deal with, especially since the social circle that all of us live in, or Chagai and I live in, is the same one that at least the Frankel family lives in. So we were getting a lot of personal messages from them that we've caused pain, and that, of course, was not our intention, and that was difficult for us.
I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then we're going to open it to the audience. I wanted to know about the intended audience for the show. Do you think about audiences as you're writing this? Do you think about, the American audience needs to get that, the Israeli audience needs to get that, the Palestinian audience needs to understand that? Are you just writing it for you to understand it? One of the things that just stands out to me about the show is seeing this on HBO, seeing this here. I don't know how it's presented exactly in Israel, if you get that same sense. It was completely from there. It was deep with the elements of the Israeli-Palestinian world, and was not actually giving any shortcuts, I felt, for an outsider's perspective. And I wonder if this was something purposeful, if you considered this, and if you're getting actually interesting reactions from the audience that is from outside of this world. I know I'm able to somewhat follow it, but I'm wondering about how others receive it.
So I wouldn't know how to make a show about Israel that has some substance that is accessible to an audience that isn't an expert or isn't invested in the nuances of the reality. So yes, I'm sure there are people who are watching it who are not aware of many of the things that we assume an audience needs to know to get into the show, but I just don't know how to make a story that would be interesting for me and for them at the same time. So truthfully, in Israel, it's everything I've done, and I think this is true for Chagai and Tawfik as well, has always been inward. It's never been directed towards an audience outside of Israel. But I can honestly say that, at least in the last 2 films that I've made and this show, this audience is something that I imagine in my head. We do want to reach an audience that isn't Israeli, but that does care about what's happening in our home. So it's for an audience that knows a lot and that wants to know a little bit more, I think.
For me, it's the audience. It's me, Joseph and Hagai. This was the average how to judge what we are doing. I didn't think about other audience. I know that Joseph and Hagai all the time thought about the Israeli audience, and for me it was like I don't care about specific audience. For me it's to tell a good story, a deep story, a personal story, because how personal you get deep, it's it can catch people, however they don't how to say, familiar with the conflict, because they are telling a personal story. Actually, I was surprised by the Israeli audience at the end, because I heard, I live in Tel Aviv, I live there, so I get all the time the reactions, and it's so powerful. A lot of people watching the show, and even people in the right side of the political map. I can tell you like a small story. My Israeli friend told me, it's like in an Israeli family, you're sitting in dinner, and you hear in the radio, in the news, it was a car accident, and you listening, and then you understand it's Arabs. It's Arabs, so okay. And suddenly in the show, it's like it's surprising, because you can identify with the Palestinian story, the Palestinian pain, and this was for me it was surprising, because I thought it will be what's called the elite show, not for everybody, and it's really surprising.
Thank you. I have a lot more to ask, but I'll just end with one question that I brought up a little bit earlier. I'm going to challenge you with this concept of fiction and reality that's happening here. And this, you bring in there's actually real shots. You end it with the reality, but throughout, actually, it's beautifully brought together. To see some of the, I'm assuming sometimes news footage. I'm assuming not all of it was reenacted for the show, and you're using real news and real footage of the reality there. You're telling a real story, most of the names not being changed even, and yet there's elements of fiction here. And this is a raw, fresh story that's not so old. We're not looking back. I mentioned earlier, today, sometimes stories from the Holocaust get retold. We're looking at stories that are still fresh and are still in the news in some ways. And I wonder if fictionalizing this in any way and adding the drama and turning this, sometimes, don't take this hard, it turns into an episode of Law and Order sometimes. And maybe for some people even who are more distanced from this topic, it really just turns everybody, as opposed to humanizing them, might turn them into characters from Law and Order, the lawyer, the police officer. And does that trivialize it a little bit, is the question that I guess I'm trying to get to.
Okay. It came, before I came to the show, Yosef really want to make a true story, to be similar to what happened. And this was a good way because it had two sides. Because in one hand, it's like you are limited how to imagine, to create, because you want to stick with the truth, and in the other side, the other hand, for example, in the Palestinian story, you want to keep the dignity of the people. You can do whatever you want, and it was a process, that we have a lot of footage from documentary. So because it's fresh, it's like 4 years ago. So we could plan the drama according to the documentary footage. And a lot of scenes, like in the demonstration in Jerusalem with Avishai, it's like you can't understand or recognize what is documented and what is drama. In the clashes in East Jerusalem, in the scene with the ambulance, when they kidnap the body of Muhammad from the ambulance of the father, it's a real scene. Somebody shoot it in the telephone, in the phone, and we used, like in this scene, we used like 4 shots of documentary, but you can't recognize. So this was part of it, just to keep it natural, how it happened, and I hope we succeed to do it.
I was thinking of my answer as Tawfik was answering this. I'm not sure I know how to separate between reality and fiction. Like the rule I had for myself was so everything here is based on something real, and there were people that we can ask. Sometimes we were getting contradicting reports on a certain episode, or definitely from Palestinian or Israeli side. The way Hussein describes his interrogation and the way the police describe that interrogation is very different. But the rule I applied for myself and for all the departments was do your best to get to something that we can verify. And usually we would also find that the real story or the small details that come from someone who was there are much better than anything we could have imagined. And some of the family stories, which obviously needed to be reworked just so that actors can use it and that we can put them into some kind of context and process or arc. But almost everything came from a conversation we had with someone. So for instance, one of the most interesting stories for me was the dilemma that the grandfather had, having to choose between a possible more lenient sentence for his grandchildren by pressuring his son to take more responsibility. And the way the lawyers were divided on that question. These were fascinating legal questions and, of course, incredibly interesting from a family point of view. And that rabbi is a character that I did find myself identifying with very closely. This is all based on things that were told to us. But like in every story, even like the stories I'm retelling now, there's an effort to make them better. So you accumulate a lot of information, and then you kind of work them into the story so that they have some poetry to them. I think that's really the only separation between fiction and reality, and an attempt by us or an effort by us to make things have meaning that maybe the raw reality doesn't. But that's it. Otherwise, I really feel that almost everything on screen is real.
I think that leads to the richness of the show and those details. So many details actually brought the show into really a new level of drama that you don't get to see. I mean, drama is sometimes just the music on a lot of TV shows, and here there was just so much more within the details that I personally found it fascinating. There are a lot of hands up. We're going to pass the microphone around. I'm going to remind the audience to ask these questions and have this conversation in the most civil way. Let's start right here. We're there.
Oh, I'm number one? Okay, so,
Morgan chose you.
yes, thank you, Morgan. So I'm gonna let others speak about the Palestinian issue because I'm sure there are many that want to speak about the Palestinian issue. I would like to speak about the issue of women, and particularly what's happening in the Orthodox community. I've had the great honor of seeing all of Yosef's films. So I've watched from Michal in Time of Favor through Rachel and Tammy in Campfire, and the two secular women, Yehudit, and yes, so Fine and Alex in Norman. So now I'm confronted with Devorah Siegel, and it's very interesting to me that she is a composite, which I didn't know before, so she's one of the few composites. So I'm very interested in that trajectory. Compare, Tawfik, to the way that you present Suha and the surprising amount of autonomy that Suha has in the drama. Those are my questions.
Yes, if you don't ask your question quickly enough, the audience will attack you. So please make sure to keep your questions concise.
Thank you for that question. Very directly, Dvorah is based on two therapists. One is a psychiatrist. The other is an ultra-Orthodox, actually a Vishnitz chassid, or a female chassid, who treated Abishai with CBT. So there were two actual therapists who were very close to these characters. They couldn't reveal everything, obviously, but there was something about their personality that helped us understand the drama that they were in. And I think the thing that was most important for us was in the second half of the series, there was a lot of pressure put on Dvorah to testify about that Yosef Chaim was insane, which I think is really a remarkable storyline when you think of like all the criticism that we've been getting on how important it is to create a clean image for Israel. So that this character had to deal exactly with that, and it was as if all of Jews needed her to say it's one isolated crazy guy and none of it can be attributed to anyone else. And she said no. So that ability to say no was something that informed this character. And then the actress who did meet with one of them and took whatever made sense to take. That's basically it. It's not. It is a composite in that it's not her name and it's not exactly one person, but here too it's really rooted in the research we did.
Were they expelled?
Expelled from where?
The community?
Not okay. The one that is more closer to that. This is a psychiatrist. She's someone who works within the ultra-Orthodox world, which is very interesting because it means that she has to be someone who the rabbis trust. And she managed to find a way to keep that trust even after the story.
Why did you change it?
Sir, please wait.
Hold on. We're going to only those with the mics ask questions.
So I need to tell the true story. The Hussein is going out. He's dealing with the system. So I tried all the time to give her appearance, a drama. I fight all the time to do it because if it was a fiction, I would go with Suha. Personally, it's for me. It's easily to go with the woman because I'm a man, so it's not interesting to go with a man. I prefer to go with the opposite. So, but this is the drama. It's a true story. So.
We have a question down here.
Thank you.
Joseph, you described, both of you actually described directing this as almost like a boxing match, right? That you each go into your ring and you send out your best, your best man to fight it out in the ring. But I'm wondering about the aspects in Israel at the time that were not being fought, but were actually integrating the two communities. For example, like the droves of Israelis that went to visit the Arab family in their mourning tent. That was not depicted in the show, and it did seem very starkly opposing, like they were these two opposing sides that never met in any empathetic way.
So the question is why didn't we show more of the integration between Israelis and Palestinians around?
Our boys.
So I'm not sure I understood the question. I'm sorry.
So my specific example that I kept thinking throughout the show was, why isn't the mourners tent being depicted with Jews and Israelis visiting the Arab family to demonstrate that this is not, which did happen, and that this is not only a story of two sides who have equal grievances, and they have to, fight it out. Where those of us who have lived in Israel know, both know that Israelis and Arabs, Muslims and Jews live a much more integrated life than is depicted on the show. So I wonder why that integration was not, that unity was never depicted at all.
I'll let Tawfik answer that, right?
You are speaking about the same Israel we live in? I understand. For me, I can tell you the most political act is to connect with people. For me, the greatest political act is to connect with Joseph, to connect with Haggai, to understand them, to understand their pain. They're confused, they understand me. It's the most political thing. For me, the most exciting, it's when I heard about a great connection between Palestinian and settler. But it's something, like you are as an artist, you can look at it at that. But the reality, it's very, very different. Because you have.
Man, we can't turn this into a one-on-one dialogue.
Just a minute, excuse me. You have a great, since Oslo collapsed, since Netanyahu and the extremist Hamas in Gaza, the gap, it's huge between Palestinians and Israel. There is no hope. It's a situation that people don't want to see it. I understand what you said. For example, I can tell you, we thought about this scene that Israel is coming to visit, but it was not so important for the drama. We thought about the drama, not about politics. Also, I can tell you. Also, it was like, for example, Uri Korb it's not. He didn't come to the tent. He didn't come to their house. In the reality, we make it as a drama. Did what?
No, she didn't.
She didn't.
She was sitting Shiva while this happened, and from her perspective, the story became clear to her only in retrospect.
Yes, I know that there's many Israelis that I can understand, that, but it's what can I from my perspective, I can tell you, it's for Palestinians, Mohammed Abu Khdeir, it's another story. Like every week you have Palestinian killed. This time it was Israeli citizens. So, and it's against the law because they are citizens, like the Shabak, they call them حساق بتحوني, how it's called, حساق بتحوني? Yes, these people have حساق بتحوني, I don't know how to say it. But soldiers can do it. They have the legitimacy to do it. Nobody asks them. So this is the reality that you have. I can understand, for me, I don't see the situation that, Israelis are bad or the Palestinians are good. It's a much complex situation. you have a bad, it's like, I think it's a bad leaders. It's not a bad people, because I believe in education. Education can change people, can create another reality, but the situation that nobody care about education. It's like those the people, as you said in the interview, that they heard somebody said, this to the Arabs, or a political like Netanyahu, Nikmat Yelet Katan, or Lo Bara Satan. Somebody, serious, saying this. And these people, just do it. And for them it was, like a normal thing.
If I could just answer this, because I'm getting something else from your question, and I think this is actually an example of what it means to make this kind of collaboration. So it's true that the prosecutor character didn't come to Abu Khdeir's morning tent. So this is a Palestinian scene that Tawfik is in charge of. And it's from his point of view, right? From his point of view, what's happening in the story now is not that Israelis are coming to cleanse their conscience in front of Hussein. He has a different story that he wants to tell in this beat of the story. We introduced Uri into the whole series by his relationship with Hussein, and for me, this Uri's character was a way to represent some of that. And while I don't have a scene with just ordinary Israelis coming into the morning tent, that idea that Uri is coming there, shaking his hand and telling him, I'm on your side, does represent what you're suggesting.
Thank you, first of all. This piece of art is nothing short of a masterpiece, and it's the first piece of art that I've seen that really reflects the tensions, all of the forces, the excruciating complexities of our country. So I really thank you for this work. My question is, how do you, Tawfik specifically, how do you respond to the criticisms that ultimately the portrayal of the Shabak in the frame of the Shabak agent as the hero is ultimately flattering to the security apparatus and to the state? How do you respond to that critique? איך אתה מתגונן על זה שאומרים שבסופו של דבר השב"כ הוא הגיבור ואנחנו לא מבקרים את השב"כ ואת התהליכים של השב"כ בסדרה?
I think the Shabak it's the hero because he controls our life. This is what it's the most powerful system in Israel. And for me, it's like I don't look at the Shabak as a system. I look at Simon as a character, as a hero. It's with his conflict. So I can understand, but you can't all the time try to analyze everything according to Walter Benjamin or the new communist radical, because you will not get out with this. I also can make a criticism about this show because at the end, you're dealing with characters, and you have this, for example, Tzahigar. He's like Mike. He's like Sgan Rosh Hashabak,
high-ranking Shabak.
But you can't stand him. You have the other side of you have the government all the time telling them what to do, not to catch them now, to make the balance with another thing. So it's the people are trying to do their own jobs, but there's a system, government control them, and at the end, it's for me it's a tragic story. I heard it from a lot of people, that it's real that Simon, after solve this investigation, it's like he need to leave his job. He's a traitor. You want to live in this country? you want to live in this place? This is what happened. And at the end, he leave the country. He's like out of his community. So it's
Next season, Simon's in New York.
Selling handbags, right? This woman has waited very, very patiently.
I wanted to just say a
Look at the left side too. This was the right side. I understand you said.
First of all, it was a fabulous series. I enjoyed every minute. Very realistic and not boring at all. And I wanted to say that from the killing of the 3 Jewish boys, that is never forgotten. That is the foundation on which you view every episode and you feel it in your heart. So Frank goes, etc. No one should ever think that we have forgotten that. Number 2. Number 3 to Tawfik. So it's very interesting. I am Israeli, my family, and all we talk about is how Israel should be and this and that. But I found myself in film completely immersed in Hussein's character. And you portrayed him and you told the story from him so beautifully and so profoundly that I just commend you for
I told you this is going to happen.
No.
This is hilarious.
No, but you're
Good.
You're allowed to give praise where praise is due.
But it's in the form of a question. Good. I will take this moment as we run to the next question to give some praise and just tell you the performances. I mean, I think they all should be getting awards for these amazing performances. And I got to point out my personal favorite, Avishai. I mean, that's just what an unbelievable character and performance. We got one right here.
Okay. Hi, Seth. Hi, Tawfik. My name is Amir Bogan. You might know me. Hi. I'm a journalist in Israel, and I really loved the show. I wrote a lot about, and in a way, I was attacked also, like you guys, because of what I wrote. A really amazing show. I wanted to know, what did you learn about the Israeli capacity of self-criticism? Not only the government and the politicians, also as much as you can, see in the nation and in the public.
One of the things that every Israeli filmmaker or Israeli artist, writer that finds himself dealing with that thing, why aren't you advocating for Israel? Recently, we had a dinner guest who asked us, why aren't Israeli storytellers telling more heroic stories about Israelis? Which is a legitimate story, because definitely from someone whose perspective starts 70, 80 years ago, Israel is an heroic narrative, and there are heroic Israeli characters. So why aren't we telling their stories? So the answer is complicated, and every writer has a different answer. I think the answer for me is heroic stories aren't as interesting, and they're usually more simplistic. We tackled this story because it was challenging. We went into it looking at the Avishai, basically, but the family of the murderers, not understanding how it happened, knowing how horrified we were by it, and really wanting to figure it out. That's it. The next stage, having to explain why we're focusing on this story and not on something more heroic or I don't know, more easier for Israel advocates to swallow. I don't know, but there's no motivation for me to tell that kind of story. I was recently asked, why aren't there more Palestinian writers who are doing the same thing about their society? And while I have an answer, Tawfik should probably say it and not me.
Why? First of all, because there's almost no Palestinian industry, no Palestinian cinema, no Palestinian country, no Palestinian nation. So it's very hard because mostly they are dealing with the daily life and the occupation, and but you know, you are right, because I think that's much more interesting, you know, to deal with non-heroic, because I don't believe people are heroic. No, it's a myth. I don't believe that, you know, somebody, you know, for me, you know, if everybody, you know, it's my personal opinion. Everybody who wear a uniform, he lose something of his humanity. This is what I think. So I don't believe in this, and I hope, you know, one time, yes, the Palestinian will have the opportunity also to, you know, I do it in my phones and in my small phones, but to have the opportunity also to deal with big issues. Why Palestinian is going to kill Jewish people just like this? Why teenagers doing this? To try to understand, because I can tell you from the other hand, you know, as Israeli, you have the privilege to to humanize Israeli terrorist. But the Palestinian don't have this privilege yet, because I don't believe that the Palestinians want to make about for example, the killers of the 3 Jewish boys. They will kick them out of the place, you know, if they go to HBO or so. So it's complicated. And I hope it will open a window for also Palestinian can do a story like this.
We have time for one more question, and I promise it'll be somebody from the middle. Morgan has the tough job of, I know there's a lot of questions, and this discussion should not end here and continue, but
I'll ask a question quickly, because I know that this lady right here in front of me had a great question as well, so no worries. My question
I
is,
think someone's kidnapped the microphone.
how did you feel that, you know, Americans throughout the country, you know, watching HBO that don't have, you know, a bite, it's, you know, in Israel, and they're watching Israel in a negative connotation, and they have an occupation philosophy over the Israeli people and the Israeli nation, and you know, it kind of changes their mindset and portrays a negative image of Israel.
Have you heard this one before?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, I'll get
Yeah, so.
The question was, how do I feel about that?
I mean, you know, was that your intention? Was that kind of the goal? Could you?
Let me put it in other words, if I may. Some might say that that this show airs Israel's dirty laundry to the American public.
That's not what he's saying. If I may.
You know, I recently heard a quote from someone. I won't name him because I have a feeling it can be attributed to more than one person. But there's this large crowd of Israelis and Jews around the world who think Israel has a PR problem and not an actual problem. You know, there is an office of foreign affairs for Israel, and they're doing their very best to keep things as clean and pro-tourism as they can. This is not our job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, he passed it to me. This is a question about the actors.
I'd love to end on that. Thank you.
Okay. So my question is, you might have had Arab Israeli, Palestinians, and Jewish Israeli actors together, and how did they process being in this, and kind of what conversations or groups might you have led during and in the culmination of this series? Anybody understand?
There was some tension between the Palestinian actors and the actors who were playing the murderers. It's very, very strange to realize that the Palestinian actors were a little suspicious of the fantastic actors who were playing Avishai Yinon and Yosef Chaim. And there was a point where this stage in our work ended very quickly, but there was a point where we thought that it may be a good idea not to like just hang out the Arab and Israeli characters, that it would be good for their work as actors to feel the tension. But then I think a day into that philosophy, we thought that's complete nonsense. They're actors and they can separate between their role on screen and their actual life, and the behind the scenes of this set was harmonious and beautiful.
Is any of this true?
Yeah, it's totally true. You know, it's I like this tension between, even, you know, I felt tension with the killers, with the murderers, because, you know, I represent the Palestinian side, so it was good for the work, this tension. But, you know, I can tell you at the end in the court, after you see this with Avishai, the investigation, just you know, Soha Ruba, the actress, you know, she just hugged him. They hugged each other, and we hugged each other. And, you know, we are people, human, professional.
I can tell you, just so that you visualize some of the technicality of this. So if you remember in episode 7, we get very close to seeing the 3 Jewish killers strangling Muhammad. So in those scenes, we had a double for Muhammad. It was a woman, actually, because there are no stunt doubles the size of Muhammad, so we worked with a female double stunt person. And just to get into the mood, we needed Muhammad to be making noises of strangulation. So we were on a sound stage. I was directing the strangling scene with the camera like really close on the hands, and Tawfik, a few meters away by another microphone, was strangling the actor who plays Muhammad for the sound effect.
Why are you doing this?
And we occasionally we would look at each other and say, you know, this is really strange, but
I knew the Palestinians did it after all. I want to thank you both so much for being here.
Can I just say one thing? Please. I want to thank you, Isaac, and the JCC.
Thank you.
You had wanted to have a screening of the first episode. That didn't work out, and we were all very appreciative that you stuck, the audience as well, that you stuck with us throughout these 10 episodes and had us here.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me. I want to thank the audience for being a part of this conversation and for continuing this conversation. You have your Yom Kippur worked out for you. So thank you all, and we hope to see you soon at other events. Thank you.